In 2018, Canadian students owe $28 billion worth of student loan debt. To make matters worse, tuition has increased by 3.7% annually for the last 10 years in Canada.
What's up? It's Martin here, and today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about OSAP and taking out student loans. I know for most of us as young students, we really haven't been dealing with money much in our day-to-day lives, and getting into trouble with money and debt is probably one of the last things we want to do. But, it happens more than you might think. In fact, in Canada, every 1 in 6 cases of insolvency are involved with student loans. And an insolvency is basically a case in which the debtor is unable to pay his or her debt and is either forced to file for bankruptcy or come up with a consumer proposal, basically talking to their creditors and coming up with a new payment plan with certain terms and conditions. With that, it should be clear that you should be very careful when dealing with student loan. And I hope that in this video, I can equip you with the information that you need to handle it responsibly. As always, the information that I use will be linked in the description below. And with anything that you see online, I believe it's important to always do your own research, and that's why I keep it in the description. So don't just take it from me. And with that being said, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, because now Google thinks that I'm in debt and every advertisement they show me has something to do with bankruptcy. So let's get right into the video. So let's start off with something really basic, and that's whether or not you're eligible to apply. And that's quite simple. If you're a Canadian resident, permanent resident, or refugee, then you are eligible for applying for OSAP. However, if you're an international student, then you are not eligible to apply for OSAP. But the good news to that is that there's financial assistance from the colleges or universities themselves that come in the form of scholarships and bursaries. As for when to apply, the latest possible date to apply for OSAP for full-time study is 60 days before your study period ends. And for part-time studies, the latest possible date is 40 days before your study period ends. But I would encourage you to apply earlier, so you know exactly how much you're getting and you can budget accordingly based off of that. I have a free budget template in the description below, so check that out if you don't really have an idea of how to organize a budget. What I'm saying is that if you do it earlier, you have one less thing to worry about. So now let's talk about the money. And what you're going to get from OSAP is a combination of a grant and a loan. And basically what a grant is money that they give you that you get to keep. And the loan is the amount of money that the province lends to you that you have to pay back at a later date, which we'll talk about later in the video. In terms of grants, if your family has a higher annual income than $140,000 a year, you are not eligible for a grant. And the amount of funding that you get for your education depends on a few factors, which include your study load, your education expenses, your financial situation, as well as if you identify as Indigenous or are a person of disability. If you want to estimate the amount of funding that you get, there's an online calculator that I linked in the description below just for that purpose. And as a side note, the amount of money that you receive from an RESP or a registered education savings plan will not affect the amount of funding that you get from OSAP. So now I'm going to briefly give you a little bit of insight to how you can keep your debt at a manageable amount. First, that starts off with budgeting. Budgeting is basically the first thing that you need to do to get your financial situation together, and really gives yourself an accurate view of how you're doing in terms of where money is moving in and out of your bank accounts. And with that, I believe that if you can see where your money is going to, then you can have a good idea of how to manage your spending habits and allocate the money where it actually needs to be, without throwing it aimlessly at places that you don't need it to be. With proper organization of your money, you'll be surprised at how much you can save just by knowing what comes in and out of your wallet. And another good thing about OSAP loans is that they have a 0% interest during your time of study. The 0% interest rate is a good thing if you can take advantage of it through leveraging that debt in investments, such as assets like stocks, bonds, or even GICs, something like that. Like for example, I'm fortunate enough to have my parents pay for most of my education, so basically what I did with my OSAP loans was that I used it towards investments, which earned me around 10 to 15% of my principal amount that I was loaned. Now I know that I'm more fortunate than most people, and the financial part of my undergraduate degree isn't too much of a worry, but I'm saying that what's left over from your OSAP grants and loans can be used better elsewhere instead of buying drinks on Fridays or something like that. This is in no way investing advice because I'm not a financial expert, so you should do your own research accordingly. But if the average stock market return is 7% after inflation, then you can basically earn an average of 7% annually for the next 4 years of undergrad, and then you can pay off the loan immediately. And you would have earned 7% on top of that loaned amount, basically for free. That is like a chef's knife. Use it skillfully and you have an incredible instrument for cooking. If you don't use it wisely,
you can probably cut yourself.
Now let's move on to paying off the loan. And a sad statistic is that only 34% of students pay off their student loans within the first 3 years of graduating, with most of the students paying off these loans 9 to 15 years after the last day of school, which is kind of sad because these graduates would finally finish paying off the student loan debt when they're in their early to even late 30s. So what you need to know when you pay off your debt is that there's a grace period of 6 months after your graduation date, which means that for those 6 months, the interest doesn't start accruing. So effectively, the loan is still at 0% interest. This means that your expected first payment is at the end of the 7th month after you graduate. Another thing about the grace period is that you can extend it by another 6 months if you're the owner of a new business in Ontario, or you work or volunteer for a not-for-profit organization. Additionally, within the first 6 months of your graduation, you will receive a package for all the terms and everything you need to know about paying your student loans from the National Student Loans Service Center, or the NSLSC. Basically, they'll tell you how much you owe, your expected monthly payment, your total payments required, and the expected date of your first payment. One side note is that you're paying the NSLSC and not OSAP. And another thing to note is that the info or payment schedule that they give you is based off a 9.5-year repayment schedule. So in reality, you can pay this off as fast as you'd like. And I'd say the faster the better. Because of course, mathematically, you pay less interest. So if you budget accordingly, you can pay off the debt a lot sooner and pay a lot less interest. And note that on average, an undergraduate bachelor's degree has a total of $28,000 of student debt tied to it. But that statistic was pulled from Stats Canada in 2015. So this number will probably be higher in today's date. So it's pretty unlikely that any of us would be able to just slap down a lump sum right when the grace period ended, unless you were in a co-op program and saved enough money for that. But for the average student, would probably have to budget and save pretty heavily in order to pay down the debt aggressively. As far as the interest rates are concerned, in Ontario, the interest rate for student loan debt is the prime rate, which is the lowest rate that banks will lend to even the most creditworthy individuals, plus 1%. And the prime rate for today's date is 2.45%. So if your grace period ended today, our interest rate in Ontario would be 3.45%. And as for the rest of Canada, from what I found, it's basically the prime rate plus 2.5%. That interest rate will be 4.95%. So if you're someone that's into investing and you want to make an immediate return, just pay off the debt. Because paying off debt in Ontario will guarantee you an immediate return of 3.45%, and anywhere else in Canada, pretty much guarantee yourself a 5% return. In terms of other forms of funding, you might ask about student lines of credit. And how that works is that it's kind of like a credit card. They give you a set limit of how much you're allowed to borrow, and you just borrow as you need. However, you have to pay interest on top of that, even while you're studying. So it can be kind of dangerous to be involved with student lines of credit and student loans that are not funded by the government. And as for payday loans, just completely avoid those. And just in general, any lines of credit that will accumulate interest during your study period, try to avoid those because likely you're not earning a substantial amount of money to even come close to paying those off during your study period. So the interest is going to pile up so high it will bury you alive. So always consider bursaries, scholarships, work-study programs, and summer employment programs before you even consider getting any other loans besides government-funded loans with more favorable conditions. And if you decide that you need to take these loans, please make sure that you've run through a full budget that reduces every expense possible, as well as taking on any side hustles or side jobs in order to generate more income. If you optimize your spending habits and did all you can to increase the amount of income that you bring in, and it's still not enough for school, consider a cheaper option such as community college that will still give you the education experience that you need for your career goals. Until all that is settled, then you can consider taking an additional loan on top of that. But don't take payday because it's actually going to destroy you. Anyway, because I brought up bankruptcy in the beginning of the video, I'll just mention it briefly. Bankruptcy does not forgive student loans unless you file for bankruptcy 7 years after your last day at school. And for Ontario, on the OSAP site, it says that you need to be out of school for at least 5 years or more before you can be forgiven for a student loan. Bankruptcies stay on your credit report for at least 6 years, and it will completely destroy your credit score, which I can make a future video about credit scores if you would like that explained in the future. So basically, in brief, having a bad credit rating can really stop you from getting loans with favorable conditions or even getting a loan at all on things that you might need to finance, like a home, a car, anything like that. So really, bankruptcy should be your last option. And yeah, I think that's about everything that I got for you today. So that's about it for this video. Smash that like button and hit subscribe to see more content like this. And comment down below if you want to see me do more videos like this, because I feel like it's really important for us as young students to be able to have the knowledge to take control of our own financial futures. So yeah, that's it. See ya. However, if you are an international student, then you are not eligible to apply for OSAP. However, blah blah. However, if you are an blah 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 blah.